Okay, in this example of fertilizer calculations, we're going to figure out how much 15-5-15 we need to put in 50 gallons of stock solution to get 200 parts per million nitrogen. But we're going to also run this through an injector at a rate of 1 to 200. So first we need to find out how many milligrams per liter of this fertilizer we need to get 200 parts per million nitrogen. And so we take 200 parts per million, or milligrams per liter, they're the same thing, and divide that by the percentage of nitrogen in our fertilizer, which is this first number, 15%, or 0.15. And we get a number of 1,333.33 milligrams per liter, or parts per million. So now we know that we need 1,333.33 milligrams of 15-5-15 per liter to get 200 parts per million. But we're not mixing up a liter, we're actually mixing up 50 gallons, and we're going to concentrate it 200 times. So we need to convert all of this into pounds per gallon, which is easier for us to deal with, and also concentrate that into 50 gallons of stock solution. So let's get this into pounds per gallon first. So we're going to do our conversions on this line and cross out the units as they divide each other. So we know that in 1 gram there are 1,000 milligrams. So milligrams cancel each other out. And in 1 pound there are 454 grams. So grams cancel out. And in 1 gallon there are 3.785 liters. So liters cancel out. We multiply across the top and divide by everything on the bottom, and we get a number of 0.011 pounds per 1 gallon. So we need just over 1/10 of a pound of 15-5-15 in 1 gallon. But remember, we've got 50 gallons here, so we're going to multiply this by 50. So we get 0.55 pounds per 50 gallons. But now we're going to concentrate this through an injector that's 1 to 200. So to do that math, we actually multiply this by 201, because for every 1 gallon of fertilizer stock solution that gets taken up by the injector, 200 gallons of water go through, so we have to add those two numbers to get 201 for the concentration, and we multiply that and we get 110.55 pounds per 50 gallons. And that will give us 200 parts per million of nitrogen from our 15-5-15 in 50 gallons of stock solution going through a 1 to 200 injector. Now, using that same solution that we mixed up to give us 200 parts per million nitrogen from a 15-5-15, we want to know how much phosphorus in parts per million is applied in that solution. We know that in the 15-5-15, 5% of that fertilizer is P2O5, or 43% of the P2O5 is actual phosphorus. So we need to figure out how much actual phosphorus is in that 5%. So we take 0.05 and multiply it by the 0.43 or 43%, and we get 2.15% of this 15,515 is actual phosphorus. So now we know from our earlier calculation that we are going to use 1,333.33 milligrams per liter of 15,515. And that's from our earlier calculation. And we know that 2.15% of that is actual phosphorus. So we're going to multiply 1,333.33 times 0.0215 times 0.0215, and that equals 28.66 milligrams per liter, or 28.66 parts per million phosphorus. Because milligrams per liter is the same as parts per million, we get 28.66 parts per million phosphorus from that calculation that we did earlier. Okay, the third and final part of this equation is we need to determine how much potassium we get when we mix 15,515 to give us 200 parts per million nitrogen. Now in 15,515 we know that that last number refers to potash, which is K2O, which is not all potassium. It's actually 83% potassium. So we need to figure out how much potassium we get in a 15,515. So we know that potash is 15%, or 0.15% of that fertilizer, and of that potash, 83% of it is potassium. So let's multiply that by 0.83, and we get 12.45. 12.45%. So if we go back to our original calculation, we knew that we needed 1,333.33 milligrams of 15,515 in 1 liter to give us 200 parts per million nitrogen. Now we know that 12.45% of that is potassium. So we multiply that by 0.1245, or 12.45%, and we get 165.99 milligrams per liter. And we know that milligrams per liter also equals parts per million. Therefore, we get 165.99 parts per million potassium when we mix a 15,515 fertilizer to 200 parts per million nitrogen. We get 165.99 parts per million potassium.